everyone, and welcome to Travels in Space. This video will be a little bit different from our normal post because today we're going to do a tutorial video covering the plugins and techniques I used to create this video. So this was made in After Effects using Lockdown, Autofill, Paint and Stick, and Deep Glow, all plugins from aescripts, as well as Video Copilot's free and excellent Saber plugin. So I will put some timestamps down in the description for each of the plugins that I cover, but for now, let's go ahead and get started. So I've got a brand new project right here in After Effects. I've imported the footage that I'm going to be using. We'll go ahead and take a peek at it here real quick. So this is a shot I took of the Phoenix tattoo that's on my wife's shoulder. Now, Lockdown, which is what we're going to be using to track the motion here, is fantastic at complex surfaces, morphing topology. But for this video, I wanted to keep it pretty simple and straightforward. So I shot this at 120 frames a second. I went ahead and slowed it down by 50%, and I stabilized the footage. Obviously, the smoother and more stable the footage you have, the easier it's going to be to track. But again, Lockdown can definitely track far more complicated pieces than this. So let's go ahead and get started. What I want to focus on is this body of the Phoenix right here. So let's go ahead and create ourselves a new composition. We're going to call this one Tracking. I'm going to make sure it's 1920 by 1080. We're all good there. I already know the length of my video clip, so we're going to keep that the same. Going to hit OK. And let's go ahead and bring in my base footage. So the first thing we want to do is we want to find the frame that we want to start with. Now, I always try to make sure that I find kind of a great frame that's really got the object I want to track right in the center. It's not morphed. It's not being blocked by anything. It's crystal clear, real easy to see. So I think somewhere right around here is probably going to be the best bet. So the next thing we got to do is go ahead and add the lockdown effect directly onto that footage. Go ahead and hit the pop out here. All right, so this is the lockdown pop out window. And here's where we're going to create our tracking points, and we're going to go ahead and resolve the actual track itself. So what we need to do to start with is create the tracking points for the tattoo. So if you hold down Control and hold down your left mouse button, click and drag a nice lasso around the area you want to track, and you will get all these tracking points. However, for our purposes, this is not nearly dense enough. There's not enough trackers in here. I'm not comfortable that it'll give me a solid track with these few. So we're going to Control Z that out. We're going to hop up here to Lasso Grid Pixel Distance, and we're going to lower this number, which lowers the distance between the tracking points. Go ahead and drag this out again. Right about there. You'll notice that we have a lot more tracking points. Now, one thing to remember, the more tracking points, the longer the track will take. However, more than likely, the more accurate the track will be. No sliding around. It's got more areas to really look at. The other thing you'll notice is I've dragged that lasso in a pretty big area around the section that I actually want to track. That's because I want a little bit of overflow. I want some areas just so I can play around a little bit more if I want to add some things to the outside of it, capture some other points. I always give myself that extra wiggle room or canvas. So now we're going to change the method from accurate 1.6 to extremely accurate. Now, obviously extremely accurate is more accurate, but it does take significantly longer to track. You can change the resolution here for what you want the target resolution to be. However, for my machine at least, doing extremely accurate and 1080p, which is what this footage is, takes an extremely long time. So I am actually just going to keep it at 540p. I have found that that gives me a very usable track, especially for something that I'm effectively just throwing up onto social media. We are going to go ahead and hit track right. We could hit track all, and this will track the entire piece of footage, but we don't actually need that. We're just tracking this one piece of the tattoo, so we're going to track to the right until I don't think we'll need the track anymore. Then we'll come back to this frame, track to the left until I don't think we need it anymore, and then we'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and start tracking to the right. All right, that's about as far as I need to the right, so let's go ahead and bring it back, and we are going to track a little bit towards the beginning of our video. I think right about there, and let's go ahead and track to the left. All right, that's as much as I need at the beginning, so let's take a peek here. You know what? Pretty good. There's a little bit of sliding here and there, but nothing I'm actually all that concerned about for this particular video. I've got the length of time that I need. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So one thing I will say is I'm not really going to cover how you could go about cleaning this up. There's a lot of great videos, especially by Chris Vranos, the actual maker of Lockdown, up on YouTube for kind of how you'd go through repairing this or sticking those track points a little bit better. But again, for the purposes of this video and this effect, this is good enough. So we're going to close this pop-out window. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hit this lockdown button. But before we do so, we need to make sure we are on the best frame we want to work with. By the way, if you're ever moving this around and it's pixelating everything, it's trying to do a fast preview for you. You can turn that off, get a better view there. It will run a little bit slower. So let's find the frame that we know we're going to want to work with, and I think that's this one right here. So we're going to go ahead and hit lockdown. And there you have it. Let's go ahead and go into this new composition, which is base.move, which is the name of my original footage, stabilized. And there you have it. We're going to go ahead and turn off this checkerboard. There we go. We're going to take a look at this footage. Let's remember this frame, 524. Go ahead and copy that. It's a little bit easier. And let's kind of scrub through a little bit and take a peek here at what we got. In a second, you'll see it start to morph around. That's actually where we no longer have it tracked. And the same thing will happen here. This was when the track points were going off of the canvas, getting destroyed. And so that also causes this warping effect. That is fixable, but again, for our purposes here, unnecessary. So let's go ahead and bring us back to that frame we started with right there. So the next step is we need to create the actual effect. So the first one I'm going to do is the neon lights that kind of surround the tattoo and blink on and off. And the way we do that is with a mask and Saber. First thing we need is to create a new solid. Let's go ahead and call this Phoenix Body Mask. Doesn't matter what color it is. We're going to go ahead and hide that layer, grab our pen tool, and we are going to create a mask that is outlining this part of the tattoo. So I'm going to speed through this, but one thing I really do want to mention is Saber and the deep glow we're going to apply to it afterwards, it's going to make any imperfections in your mask path really stand out. And I am just going to be doing kind of a quick and dirty mask. It's going to be a little jagged, a little bit janky. This is where the art comes in. For any of you who are trying to do this, you really need to put a lot of work into making this mask as smooth as possible. So let me go ahead and get started on this here. All right, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and say that's good enough. Again, this one was quick and dirty, and if you're making this one for yourself, please, please, please make sure you keep these paths really clean, really smooth. So the next thing is we're going to go ahead and turn that back on. Yeah, a little janky, but I'm all right with it. And we are going to add the Saber effect. So let's go ahead and get that tossed on there. There we go. You'll notice it's a bit much. We got to change a few settings here. The first one is the render settings. We want to composite it to transparent. The second one is we want it to follow the math. So in customize core type, we're going to change that to layer masks. There you go. It's a bit intense. We're also not actually going to be using the glow from Saber. I just like the way it makes the core, and it gives me some nice animation options. But let's go ahead and bring the glow intensity all the way down. And you'll see now we're left with a very thick core, probably too thick for our purposes. So let's go ahead and bring that core down. Let's try 1. Yeah, that's not too bad. I like where that's going. So let's go ahead, let's pop back into our tracking composition, take a look at that. And as you can see, it is locked onto there pretty well. I really like how that looks. So let's go ahead and pop back into here. I'd say maybe make it just a little bit thicker. Let's bring that up to 1.25. And let's change the color of this one. Let's give it a nice kind of pinkish hue. A little more red than pink, but I'm pretty happy with it. You can also go ahead and mess with a few of these. Let's bring that glow spread down all the way, bring that glow bias down all the way, just so we don't have any glow coming in from Saber. Yeah, that's not bad at all. So we'll need a little bit of glow just to bring in the color. If not, you're just going to get pure white from Saber. All right, so we got a little bit there. So at this point, let's go ahead and bring in Deep Glow. Now, Deep Glow, it just creates a really good glow for whatever you're putting it on, but it's probably one of the best glows I have seen. So you'll notice we got some weirdness going on here. Look at kind of that area that's kind of surrounding all that. What's that about, right? So the reason for that is I made a common mistake that a lot of people often make when they use Lockdown is they threw it onto this base move stabilized composition. That is not where that goes. Let's go ahead and kill that. And let's bring Deep Glow onto this, the base dot move that it created. Now you'll notice we're not constrained. There's not that weird kind of cutoff masking halo effect. And right here, we've got an excellent glow that is perfectly tracked onto our footage. So at this point, I want to make a few adjustments to the glow. The first one is I wanted this to be kind of pink, and right now it's not. So let's turn on the tint for Deep Glow. That's a bit much. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit of that pinkish color. That's a little bit better, but again, it's a bit much. So let's bring that mix down. There we go. That is a nice neon pink. That is excellent. And again, janky mask path, but it's all right for this. So the next thing that I like to do, and again, this is where we start getting into more art than technique, but I do like to throw just the smallest amount of chromatic aberration onto these. I have no legitimate reason other than I just happen to like the way it looks. So there we go. You can see we've got that tracked on there now. You'll also notice as we start to head towards the beginning of this, that tattoo almost has a peel-off kind of effect. Again, there are ways around that. There are ways to track Lockdown when it moves off screen like that, but we didn't really need to for this one, and there are plenty of other videos out there that go far more in depth into the technicalities of how Lockdown works. So now we've got our Deep Glow on there. We've got our Saber path, which looks great. We've got our neon light. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of opacity animation. So let's go ahead and move to the frame just before it starts getting cut off. There we go. Let's bring it a few frames up. Let's get it to 100, and let's give it some neon flickering. So 2 frames later, let's drop it down to 0. And then bring it right back up 1 frame later to 100%. Let's go ahead and figure out where we want this to end. I'm going to say I want it to end right about there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that right there. We're going to go right up to here. We're going to mark that one. Let's jump ahead. Let's drop that to 0. All the way down. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of dimming here and there. You could probably write some pretty good expressions for this or do something with time or flicker, but I kind of like doing this stuff by hand. I feel like it makes it just a little bit more organic. Again, that is one of those, art preferences, not so much technique. We're going to go ahead and easy ease those keyframes. And let's go ahead and take a look at how this comes out. So I like to leave my mistakes in these videos. I just realized that the amount of chromatic aberration is still crazy high at 0.25. So let's go ahead and re-render that and take another peek. There we go. Not too bad. Let's go ahead and watch that through. It looks pretty good. Now, in the final video, I would probably do a lot more dimming and some more keyframing on the opacity there, just to give it a little bit more action, a little bit more life. But again, we're just kind of going over technique here, and I'm pretty happy with that. So the next thing that we want to animate is we want to take a look at all these dots and these tattoos, and I kind of want to make an LED type effect, kind of each one of these turning on in sequence. And to do that, we are going to use Paint in Stick to hand paint those dots. What we're going to do is we're going to do kind of an LED light up of these dots here, one after another, and then make them flash a little bit. So the first thing we got to do is we have to create ourselves a new solid. And we're going to call this one paint. So right here, we are going to load in the paint and stick effect directly onto that. You'll notice that it now makes it transparent and we get a little brush. So there's a couple pieces of setup we have to do beforehand. The first one is we have to make a location or save to a location where it's going to put all of these image files that are effectively the drawings or the paint that we're doing for each frame. So give me 1 second. Let's go ahead and get that path set. You do it by clicking right up here where it says not yet set. All right, so we've got that set. The next thing we have to do is change the size of our brush. So we're going to show the brush palette by clicking this button. Let me drag that over to this window. And there we go. We've got ourselves a brush palette. Now, I want the size of this brush to be about the size of those dots because I don't want to have to do a lot of painting. I just want to click on each one. So let's bring that down to 8. Let's see. Still a little big. Let's try 6. There we go. That is the perfect size. We're going to keep it white because any color that I want to give to this, I'm actually going to do it with deep glow. And in truth, I'm probably going to keep it white and just put some heavy chromatic aberration on it to give it kind of a light effect. Again, this is a quick and dirty effect, and I'm just showing you guys the technique and the basics. There is a lot more time you can spend tweaking this and improving the art, but this is just the technique that I used. So let's go ahead and close this window. Pretty happy with this brush size. The next thing I'm going to turn on is onion skinning. Onion skinning is originally an old school animation technique. It's where the paper was slightly transparent where you were drawing so you could see your previous frames. And then if you laid down the other sheets, you could even see your future frames. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on. And we're going to go into past frames and future frames. And we're going to change that to, I usually like doing it about 5 or 6. We'll go with 6. I also go ahead and bring down the near opacity so it's not quite as heavy so I can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the dots down here. So we're going to do 1 dot. We're going to move forward 1 frame. And now you'll see you've got this orange marker here that's showing you where you painted the last frame. Now, if we go before that, we'll have this blue marker that's showing where a future drawing is coming up. So let's go ahead and move here and do another dot. And what we're going to do is every 2 frames, we're going to add a new dot until we get to the very end. And then at the end, we're going to have them all flicker. So I'm going to go ahead and run through this. It is rather time consuming since you are hand painting effectively frame by frame. But in my opinion, it's worth it. I think it really creates a really neat effect. So let's go ahead and get that done. All right, so there we go. You can go ahead and see that here. It was a little slow there because we got all these frames trying to come in, but what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and turn off the onion skinning. Right there. We are going to go ahead and add the deep glow effect to this layer. There we go. Let's go ahead and get that on there. There we are. Let's go ahead and jump ahead just a little bit, take a peek. Now, I'm going to keep it kind of a white color, but I am going to go ahead and add that chromatic aberration back in. I'm going to switch that to red and green. Well, yeah, I think green and blue is actually what I like more. Bring down that chromatic aberration to right about there. So let's go ahead, jump back to here, go ahead and render these frames. There we go. It's on there. It's very, very quick. It's part of the reason why I went very fast doing this. However, I will say when I did the first version of the video, I definitely took my time. Each one of these kind of dot areas probably took me about 20 to 30 minutes a piece. I just did this one in about 3 or 4 minutes. So the more time you're willing to spend on this, and you can even notice I missed a dot right there at one point. So it comes down to how much time you're willing to invest and how do you want it to look? How perfect do you want it to be? But that is how I used paint and stick for doing kind of all the individual dots on the tattoo. And I mean, you could go overboard. You could come in and hand paint traces around each tattoo. You could technically, track this area. Might make it a little bit easier to add your paint so you're not having to move it each frame. There's a lot of options. But this is how I specifically did it. I really like kind of the organic feel to it, but your mileage may vary, especially if you're doing it on a different type of tattoo or a different image. I would actually recommend, and I think had I been doing this video with a little bit more experience in Lockdown, I would have actually tracked the area with the dots, and that way I could have just come into something like this and just painted it right here, each frame, on, off, what have you. You could even use shapes at that point, layers, opacities, but I really like the paint and stick. I really like anything that gives me onion skinning, and it was very, very hard to find an onion skin tool in After Effects until I came across paint and sticks. Very, very happy with it. But let's go ahead and move over to the autofill. You'll notice in the original video, we had kind of a fill that would flow through these tattoos here and kind of glow and give it a bit of a liquid shape. And we did that with autofill, and we actually took advantage of one of the presets, the gradient preset that exists in Autofill. So let's go ahead and move over to doing that. So one of the things you get when you get a copy of Autofill is you also get a presets file. So we're going to go back to our project and we are going to import the Autofill presets file. There we go. We've got this folder right here. And so it gives you a couple of compositions like your logo, editing the autofill, editing the speed map, quite a few things here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get the shape that we made for the tattoo into this your logo section. So let's go ahead and go back to our base move stabilize. There's our Phoenix body mask. Let's go ahead and copy that. Go ahead and go back to your logo, toss that in there. Go ahead and hide that one. There is our Phoenix body mask. It is right there. Looks perfect. Now you'll notice that it's still got the Saber on it, still got a few things on it. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of Saber. There we go. We're going to go ahead and go into the transform, and we're going to remove all the keyframes for opacity. Go bring that right back up. All right, so now we're going to head over to Edit Autofill. So let's zoom out a little bit here. Let's go ahead and go into the effect controls for autofill. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say preview input so we can see the mask that we're going to be filling. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to change where this autofill will start. So let's go ahead and start it, let's say right about there. You can see there's already a little bit of autofill coming in. And if you see all that, you can kind of see how it all works. So the first thing I want to do is I do want to drop the radius just a little bit. We're going to drop that to 5. Well, let's bring that down to 2. That's going to give us a slower kind of fill here. And so far, that looks pretty great. Let's take a look at the speed map. I think the speed map looks good. It kind of auto-generated one there. This controls how fast it will fill in some of the areas. I'm pretty happy with how it came out. So we can kind of see that fill right there. That's great. But if you saw in the original video, we had kind of not really filling the entire piece of the tattoo together. It was more spreading through, but then fading out directly after it. So the way we're going to do that gradient is specifically with one of their tools, literally called gradient. So this is the gradient project. You can see it right here. And if you take a look at that, that's kind of given us what we're looking for. That's effectively what we want. So the easiest way that we can do this is we're going to go back into our base move stabilized. We're going to go ahead and take this gradient and we are going to toss it in right here directly under that mask. Go ahead and head back to the beginning. And you'll kind of see that gradient moving through right here. But obviously it's starting at the wrong time, so let's go ahead and bring that up to right about there. And there we go. There are still a few changes that we are going to have to make. So the first big change is we need to use the extract effect to kind of get rid of the grayness that's showing up. So let's go ahead and alter our settings here. Give that a little bit of softness. And let's back up so we can get a little bit better of a look here. There we go. Yeah, that is definitely starting to look a little bit better. Let's bring that softness up just a little bit. That's perfect. So let's go ahead and go back to the edit autofill here. Let's go ahead and select this layer and let's go ahead and turn off the preview input. Head on back to the stabilized here. Move forward in the simulation. That's not too bad. Let's go ahead and just hide this layer real quick just so we can see it. Yeah, that's moving about how we'd want it to move. Let's up the softness here just a little bit, or actually lower the softness here just a little bit. I don't want it to be that much. And there we go. So you can now kind of see that effect will come in, and it will spread itself throughout the tattoo until eventually it will entirely fade out once it reaches the edges. So let's go a little bit further. Now, there is a bit of a quirk I have seen sometimes when running autofill is you'll get kind of these leftover areas. Sometimes they stay on, sometimes they don't. What you can do is, once you get to the point where you do want everything to disappear, you can always keyframe the opacity for it to go away, but this one seems to be running perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and drop back into our tracking. There we go there. So as you can see, the autofill is running off the same deep glow filter that we've got here. With kind of that pink tint, and we're okay with that. If you wanted to give it its own glow, you could always do it in a different composition than what you did the neon lines in, but for this case, we're going to go ahead and just leave it in the same one. And that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and move to the start here, and let's go ahead and render this out and see how it looks. I say, I'm pretty happy with that for a pretty quick effect. Kind of thrown on there in just a few minutes. It's not half bad. Now again, there are a lot of tutorials online that go far more in depth into each one of these plugins, what each one of their functions do, all the different options you have, and even some of the presets that come with them. This was just to kind of show how I went about creating that kind of neon tattoo video with the LED lights and the flowing autofill going through the shapes, just to give you a general idea of how you can go about creating an effect like this yourself with these 5 tools and not a lot of time. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that this was at least mildly informational for the people who were curious about how I went about making that video. And hopefully I will put out some more later on. Thank you for watching.